this work session to order. The first item on our agenda are board goals. And for the benefit of the viewing audience, before this, the board worked on creating belief statements, which would guide our developing board goals. And so we went through a process of all contributing to our individual beliefs, and then we combined them, and then we picked out the top 7 board goals that we thought were the ones we wanted to go with, and we narrowed that to 3. So I will read those 3 and then tell you what our belief statement finally ended up being, so that you have some context when, for the viewing audience before we talk about establishing goals and what we want to establish. So the first statement of belief would be the board believes in giving students skills, agency, choice, and a growth mindset to do whatever they want with their lives. The second statement was the board believes in helping our children, students, become productive citizens with an ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And the third belief statement was we believe in fairness and in collaborating with others. And so the statement ended up being, we believe in collaboration, equity, empowerment, and in putting students first. So with that, does the staff or Candy, Randy, do you have any guidance as to how we should proceed in this meeting in relationship to discussing what we want to create for our goals as a board? In terms of procedure.
Well, just procedurally, I think it's just open to the discussion of the board at this point. I mean, you've done the work so far and had some time to think about what you have down, and so I would start there.
So, what's the pleasure of the board?
So can I share actually something that I learned at OSBA?
Sure.
So I like this as a framework. I don't think I made enough copies, but
You got a copy.
so this is one of the presentations I went to.
Send me one more.
We're going to take one.
Yeah.
Batch. So these go together. They're double-sided.
So should we just, we're gonna get enough copies for everyone, is that right? Or
Yeah, so take your copies.
Okay.
And so I'm sharing this because it was a view as to how Philomath did that, so that's why it's all Philomath. But what I liked about them, just kind of in brief, is they chose their goals, which is this front sheet here. They've established their 5 goals. But then if you look on the back, what they've done in the first column is the goals stated again. Then they have the metrics by which they're going to be kind of judging or measuring those goals. And ultimately the far right column then are actionable items that the board is doing. And then what I liked about that, if you go to the second sheet, is then they've transferred all of those actionable items into a yearly calendar for their meetings, so that there's a constant kind of thought and review of the goals and how we're getting there. So I really like that as a framework, and it really just stood out to me, something that I thought worth sharing to all of us. Something to think about just from a structure standpoint. In kind of reading through their goals, they seem very more long-term to me in the way they framed it. And I think part of the discussion for us needs to be, do we want yearly goals, or do we want, more long-term? Like, do you want to establish like a 2030 vision and have goals and then kind of itemize that? Or so that to me, I liked how you turned goals into actionable items that you could then follow up and kind of keep a pulse on how you are tracking against those, so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, in general, a goal has to be something you can measure, like SMART goals.
SMART, yeah, the
Workplace,
acronym.
Yeah.
I like this idea.
That was a good idea. So what they shared during that presentation, it took them, I think, about 18 months, is what they shared.
To develop all
To
these?
develop all that. So I don't know necessarily that that would be kind of our timeline, but
So you're seeing this as kind of a long-term project?
I'm just saying for more of a framework. So if we're going to have goals, we also need to find the metrics, and then what do those metrics in turn to actions for us as a board?
So we're accountable to.
So
attaining the goals.
we're tracking to whatever we're setting as a goal. It just seemed a very organized way to do it in my mind.
Mhm.
So I think maybe that we can look at this in the digestible chunks, so maybe we could come up with, 5 goals is a pretty solid thing to do, and it's not overwhelming, but it gives us a pathway towards fulfilling our belief statement and the district's goals. So maybe, one chunk would be coming up with 5 goals, and then another chunk might be breaking, maybe 4 other or 5 different work sessions where we break them out and then come up with the metrics and the resources and actions. Does that sound?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I mean, I'm just kind of thinking about kind of
Yeah.
progressive things, but maybe we can come up with some overarching goals and objectives and then get into the details in another meeting. 5 different meetings for each one of those areas.
Mhm.
Does that sound doable to you guys?
Mhm.
This was really great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a
I was
great
just like,
step.
okay, where do we start?
Yeah, no, like, it was very timely, and like, I jumped at the opportunity to go to that
Yeah.
session because
Yeah.
I knew we were gonna be up against it, so. And it turned out to actually be fairly worthwhile information.
So where do we go here with this tonight?
I mean, we could brainstorm what the broad goals are at this point, right?
Yeah, I know
First step.
Rebecca at one point had mentioned, looking at the time frame of say, a year. And like, for instance, she, I think at one of our get-togethers had mentioned the goal of having a successful superintendent search, which I think is very kind of relevant to this year for us as a board. And then beyond that, I think we could add a few more to that, but.
Maybe in a broader sense, would the goal be including like finding that person, but then creating a relationship, between the new superintendent, the board, the staff? Like, is it a broader goal though, actually? Because the task of finding that person is going to be done in a few months. So shouldn't it include like
Longer
the
term.
stuff around it, like how we then foster that relationship and help that position
Yeah.
succeed?
Maybe something along the lines of hiring and then providing a successful onboarding of a new superintendent, and that's a little bit broader. What do you guys think of that? And onboarding is going to be, but no one's an instant expert as soon as they walk in the job, right, Candy? So, that could be a kind of a long-term thing, because there's a lot of different things that we need to be doing to help make sure that person's successful and coming on board and feeling comfortable too, so. So that might be a good kind of first step goal. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I assume Cindy's taking notes, or we don't have to, or do we have to ratify these or vote on them, or how does that work?
Not at this meeting.
Okay,
You're
we're
just
just
doing work.
kind of
Yeah, yeah.
throwing out ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other goals? We got one.
Should one of us like volunteer to like actually write how the goal would sound, like maybe after this to bring back to the next session?
Oh, like wordsmithing?
Yeah.
Yeah, any work you can do, you can reminder all board meetings, or whether it's a work session or not, is a board meeting, but in order to take action on items, you have to announce it ahead of time. So you can actually have action items at a work session, but you may want to just forward if you get some work done in between, and you agree with what it's going to be, and then somebody's going to reduce it to writing or whatever, you can move it forward to the next, to be on a board agenda for approval, discussion/action.
So,
Oh, you want me to help?
sure.
So just for your information, when we went through the Lighthouse training before, we did do something similar to this
Yeah,
in terms
right.
of calendaring.
Yeah,
So
I
we do
remember.
have a North Wasco version of this. We didn't do that this year because we were moving into the promise and the, the new, and so many new board members. So we didn't want to assume and just roll something forward that you didn't have a part in creating, so.
But what is on that calendar?
It'd be worthwhile reviewing it.
It's a typical kind of basic, generic, that makes sense for this district in terms of the time of year, that certain things. So, I mean, it's a good start.
And in particular, I would just
It
point
really
out,
helps
so,
us with that.
because looking at your metrics and then looking at some of the dates and so forth, and one of the things that you're going to be talking about later, Rebecca had put in, so for example, she wanted to develop board and superintendent goals for the next school year by June 1st. Well, in reality, if you've got a new superintendent, you want to develop those goals with that new superintendent. You're also, the way the rhythm of the year works, you don't get all of the data that we need until after school is out anyway. And so what we've done in the past is to move that into an August retreat for us. And you actually, at that, if you can get it right, that's the place to start working on your superintendent goal with the superintendent present. So that's the kind of thing that if you see ours, that's what you'll see, and such a date. And then it'll talk about the district leadership teams, which we'll start to have feel for as we go into this, when Renee comes this next time.
So could that be a second goal, is to work throughout the year on establishing a planning calendar for ourselves?
Well, what would be good is, a lot of what I'm seeing here is
Yeah.
already part, because
Right.
it's the natural rhythm of the school
Of the
year. Like,
school
for
year,
example,
right.
Division 22, I have to bring it to you it will be to you in January, because it has to be into the state of Oregon by February. So it's part of what naturally has to happen. It's just a way of organizing it. And then I like this. This is, they've done a really good job with this. So it's just filling out those pieces. But I think if you start with a combination of what they've suggested, because it could enhance what we used to do, but it seems like if you like this template, why not, pull what we used to do and then just enhance it.
So if we all have a copy of the,
Yeah, we can do that too.
combine those two.
Yeah.
And these are almost ongoing all the time, and then we have to decide, I think every year we should have one or two key, this year it's the superintendent, but next year maybe it's two things that you have a goal like this that's never not really gonna change.
Mhm.
And one of our goals could be, you could even make it a sixth one, that is establish yearly goals for next year
Mhm.
Yeah.
that are constantly changing based on the need of the year and what we want to push, what needle we want.
Mhm. Yep.
And I actually like directly their goal number 3.
I was gonna say, number
Totally
3 is
applies
totally to us. That's an
Right?
easy one for us,
Yeah.
for sure.
Right. Because that's part of our belief statement.
Mhm.
And we're gonna be talking about that later anyway.
So for the listening audience, it's what's on this Philomath School Board. Shall I read it?
Sure.
So their number 3 goal is a communication framework with district staff, parents, family, community members is in place to promote student achievement and success and to solicit input, support, and engagement with the community. So that's their goal, but that's a for
Well, I
us.
like their metrics, so the board member liaison for each building, regular updates at meetings. So those are really good.
I think David had, well, this has been kind of floated around, well, never mind, that's getting into nitty-gritties, but we're talking about having more students come in front of the board to report what's going on. Because we really liked having the students there last time, the board
Yeah,
meeting. It was awesome.
Having that up there is awesome.
At the special meeting, a lot of parents were thrilled with that.
They like that.
Yeah.
Good. That's what we need. is
But that's
feedback
more
like that.
detail work, but we
Yeah.
can work that in there.
So then we have 2 goals so far. Superintendent search, communication, Michelle Wordsmith.
Yeah. I will work on that.
What about number 2? I mean, that's pretty standard, a review of, I mean, we do that in our professional learning.
Yes, and you'll start doing that with the 16th, you'll learn the rhythm of how we are going to be doing that, and with a little bit of change that Renee is going to be bringing to us from what we used to do with the lighthouse. So I think that's,
Probably not saying periodic review, you're going to do it several times.
you're going to do it, say, yeah, exactly.
I was going to say another goal we might have is to figure out what we need to do with the Student Success Act.
Well, that was the other thing I was thinking in the back of my mind, is
Same.
you've got that Student Success Act plan that's due to the state. We won't have the final template of how to, exactly how we need to work that until the end of January, but I think that would be huge this year, because
But it's also going to drive the goal because there are measurement metrics that go with that work.
That kind of
Right.
goes into number 2. The annual review of student achievement is
Yes.
kind of tied into that. So maybe we can make a hybrid number 2 that incorporates the Student Success Act language in there. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Just to modify their number 2 to suit.
I can wordsmith that too. You want? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So for the listening audience again, the number 2 goal we're thinking about is an annual review of, and it could be a periodic review, of student achievement is in place across all subgroups, aligned to our key success factors, identifying means, methods, and outcomes for continued improvement. So we have basically.
That was 2? I thought that was 3. I thought 2
Oh,
was the
sorry, that's the
communication.
third one that we're talking about.
Okay, that's what I
And
meant.
we're referring to the
Number 2 on the
template,
Philomath one.
number 2 on their
Yeah,
template.
yeah.
Got
So
it.
that would be a third goal for us.
Thank you.
We don't need to establish 5 goals. We can.
No.
And I would really caution you.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of,
Since we're all new, we got everything
Yeah.
to look at.
yeah.
I'm thinking
I would,
3 sound pretty solid to me.
3.
good for a
3 is
start.
sounding good.
And when you fill that out and everything, that gives us experience of using this model.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus you got one that you're going to solve and be able to check off because you don't go to the superintendent. That's not
Yeah.
worried. Yeah, we got to go with that.
We hope.
Yeah, you will.
Yes, you will. I'm going to make sure you do.
Otherwise, we got issues.
These 3 are great though because they're all very necessary. They're
Yeah.
important.
All right, do we want to do anything more with those at this time? Or be thinking about how to,
Well, I think, so Dawn will wordsmith it,
We'll get a copy of it.
that she can send out.
Cindy will get you a copy of
Cindy
the
will send out the whole annual calendar. Then I think the next time that we can bring forward the goals to, what metrics we need to define them and start that process. And at the same time then, like Michael was saying, is taking a look at both of these kind of annual calendars and figuring out how to merge them or update them or make them applicable to us in the district.
Well, again, like I say, just in looking at this, a lot of this is similar to the rhythm of what we've done. The only thing I would say is just from working through this for a number of years, trying to set things in June is not a good idea. it's really August is the earliest. You're not going to get what you need in July. That's always finalizing data that needs to go in. And then in August is the earliest that you can do it, and that'll be actually be preliminary work. You will, as you know, this year when the report card came out, that's your final kind of your. If you only did an annual review, you would do it around the time that the state report card was released for those particular areas. If you're looking at your academic pieces, it would make sure that it would make sense to do that at that time. But we want to do it in the formative because as we always say in North Wasco, let's not do a post-mortem. Let's make sure we know how they're doing along the way and not say, oops, missed that one, try again next year. What can we do to adjust during the year? So since the teachers are all doing that, you have that sort of information come to you.
Any further thoughts? Brian, move on.
Obviously, we'll wordsmith these three, and then we can vote on them as presented.
You can move them to an agenda on the board meeting to vote on if you're
And then
prepared
once
to
we
do
approve
that.
that, then we can get into the details as far as metrics and board action
Yeah.
results. So that would be 3 different sessions for maybe you to vote for each one. Maybe we can knock them out in one night, I don't know, but
Sure.
I just want
Give
to.
yourself some homework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love them.
Do I need to make a motion on that?
No motions tonight. You don't have any.
All right.
Getting work done, John.
The only homework is Dawn and her work day.
Yeah.
All on you. And she's so good at it.
Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
It'll be a struggle for everybody else, but not for Dawn. I remember wordsmithing our vision statement. Remember that, Candy?
Yes.
And we had
Okay,
a
post-traumatic
gathering.
stress kicks in.
It took a while.
It took a while, yes, it did.
And then there was, yeah.
But it came out really, really well. It did. And it's something, like the tagline is something we've continued to use.
Yeah.
So it was really a good thing to do because we'd had the same one for years and years and years. And it was a lot of work, but
We
it
needed
was
a
worth
fresh
it.
approach.
Yeah, it was worth it.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is policy review. And so it's the policies that we wanted to review was brought up at a couple of board meetings ago about our having to approve field trips at each board meeting, and maybe changing that from that model to one in which administration could make that decision instead of board, except for out of state. So you want to talk just about that concept of doing that?
And just a little bit of input from Rick Stuckey on the out-of-state piece. He said that it's a board discretionary issue, but he's worked with other districts that are close to state lines, and rather than an out-of-state travel language, they put a mileage distance requirement for board approval. And so perhaps that makes more sense than,
We have both.
pardon?
We have both out of state.
We do have both, yes.
But you can go out of state if you just went like to Vancouver. That's not 100 miles. Before that, for approval. You can go out of state for more than 100 miles. But yeah, John, the
Going
one-
to Idaho or Montana would be
Yeah.
different.
But again, as it's discretionary, we wrote the administrative rule that said that's what we're going to do, but that is, and/or. So the only ones you review now are the out-of-state ones.
Right.
That are approved. I thought one part of the conversation was,
Rebecca had, and
should
I've got
it
her.
just be part of the consent agenda?
She said that consider removing the policy that requires board approval for out-of-state travel. She believes that the superintendent can make that call, following existing policy and budget. It feels like micromanaging for the board to do this. Secondly, I want to free up more time for our board meetings to discuss more substantive strategic issues and not get bogged down time-wise on small potatoes. So,
Is there any real reason, I mean, other than the fact that we have it, we have to?
it's, Rick said it's discretionary.
But I mean, insurance-wise or anything else, there's nothing. I mean, I do have to say, it's kind of nice to hear the presentations of why somebody's going somewhere.
Yeah.
So it is, you know, so-and-so's going here because they're gonna learn this or learn that, but I don't know why we have to.
We could put a description of it, just the fact, why we're going.
In the
On the
packet.
form, well, you know, not necessarily revise the form, but there's a half-page narrative of this is the annual conference or whatever it is.
Or we could have them report back instead of, because I'm just trying to think of it from an employee standpoint. It feels like they have to get up and justify themselves going to this. And, you know, it's one thing if it's by rote, okay, yes, here's all my paperwork, here's all my documentation. It goes to the administrator and they decide yes or no, but then having to come and talk about it. I mean, if I were an employee, I'd feel like I'm having to justify myself. I don't know, maybe they like the interaction. I like meeting the people they're going.
Well, hearing
but
the after would be even better than hearing.
That's what I'm thinking too,
But it
so
is
they don't,
nice for some.
yeah,
Yeah,
but maybe
I
not,
agree with that.
not so much, not trying to do it before, but just have the approval process. And a lot of these things, I mean, I noticed that we had like, people were leaving in 3 days from the time, so.
Yeah, sometimes you don't. You don't
Yeah, and
know
I know that,
once,
it's just
yeah.
the cycle, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying that, you know, if we had said no, then what, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm just saying that, you know, leave it to administrators to make the decision, yes or no, based on the policies. And then if we could have a report back, that would be great. We get to see the teacher, we get to learn something, and there's that interaction. Then they're happy to share their knowledge versus feeling like they're having to justify themselves.
Could I make one suggestion? I don't know that this has ever happened, maybe it has, that, not in the 15 years I've been representing the board, that there's been a denial of the out-of-state travel for, because hopefully those are being sorted at the school level. But you might consider having a provision in the administrative rule that says that they could come to the board and ask for permission if for some reason it is denied
Okay, I'd go along with that.
by an administrator. By the administration, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I don't agree with that, I really don't. Because then you're pitting your administrators, you know, you make it, and then you're gonna have administrators thinking, ooh, do I,
You're gonna get second guessed.
yeah, do I get second guessed if I do this?
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and they have, I mean, we have no idea what's going on.
I mean, somebody can always complain.
Yeah.
They can always file a complaint that I shouldn't have been denied this, and here's why. And the board can say, ooh, you know, and take it through the complaint process. But having that in the back of an administrator's head that, well, I'm, you know, am I
That's a
doing
good
this?
point, yeah.
Well, if the report is on a consent agenda that we approve, just, you know, as a consent, part of the consent agenda,
Sure.
a board member can always take that you know, that particular item off in order to discuss it.
Sure.
So there can be conversation about that if that there is a question on that. So, I mean, that's one advantage of putting that in the consent agenda, I would think.
Yeah, if you're just going to move ones that have already been pre-screened, because everything's pre-screened before it comes to the board, and then just put it on the consent agenda, and that would simplify it, it would.
And Stuckey really said it was our call, huh?
He said, in particular, he was focusing on the out-of-state travel, out-of-state or out-of-country travel must have prior board approval, and he said that's discretionary.
Yeah.
That you actually don't have to
Ours
approve.
actually sounds pretty.
Well, yeah.
And you know, I don't know if you experienced it lately, but sometimes people think they're only gonna go up, and I remember food service went to Yakima.
Yes.
And it turned out to be 112 miles. Or
Right.
120 miles.
And so you're actually in
they're
violation of
violation
policy.
of the thing, 'cause
Yeah.
you didn't get permission. And this says we're not gonna pay for your expenses if you need prior approval about.
Yeah.
We're probably going to buy the airline ticket anyway, because it already happened. So I just don't want to gotcha because of something that we're 99.9% of the time going to approve anyway. It's
So-
nice to know where we're going and who's doing what.
Well, like we have the report afterwards, I think that would be helpful.
I think that's important. I think you need
And I think if we,
to know what's.
if we would truly make it discretionary, that, you know, you're going to do it on the consent, we need to soften up this language in this, they are, that, you know, you're on your own, we're not reimbursing your expenses, because you need the permission before you let down.
Well, I think it's important for them to have permission from them. So we can rework this and just put it to the management level and then just be on the consent agenda, and then if you have questions about it, that you can pull it from the consent agenda and talk about
Well,
it.
just like what Rebecca had said about the, I mean, I was a little surprised to see these requests coming in front of the board. Because it seems like that's an administrative thing, you know, that's not vision, you know?
Sure.
That, and so when we go back to the basics of what the board function is versus the staff function, that's more administrative, managing people, versus that's not a vision thing. So I just kind of thought that was a little,
Well, I think it comes from a culture and a time of, you know, just former boards wanting more oversight of wanting to ensure, because we haven't had anything happen that's been a big deal, but in the former districts, they had. So when we consolidated, you know, there was a time when, for example, there would be trips where, you know, maybe the chaperones didn't stay with the kids that were in the motel. They went out to go to dinner or whatever together and left the kids unsupervised, and that didn't always go so well. So, but anyway, I think so. I think it came out of things that usually when you have board policy, it comes because you have some response to something, and I think that just stayed with it. But I don't know of anything that couldn't be handled at the administrative level.
I think it would go a long way to build trust.
yes.
Because we
Yeah.
do and should trust our administration to make good decisions. And then reporting back to us, like what that investment is gaining for the
Yes,
district
that's
is
important.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to Don's point, that, we don't have any choice with this language, we have to bring it to the board.
Yeah. So we can adjust the
We got
language.
to work on the
Look at that.
Yeah. So what's next? Then would you guys revise that and present it to the board? Okay.
Any more thoughts on that part? Board members?
Well, that's my one question, are we just talking about field trips and extended field trips?
Or everything
Or are we
else?
talking about, like, when teachers are trying to go to training and stuff too? Because-
It encompasses everything.
Everything.
Well, that's what this is. Are we talking about the DLC or the IICA?
There's IICA,
I don't
DLC,
have the DLC.
DLC
It's,
is in expense reimbursement.
That's for travel.
So this is district employees who incur expenses in carrying out their authorized duties will be reimbursed upon submission of properly completed and approved voucher and receipts as required by the business office. Such expenses may be incurred and approved in line with budgetary allocations for specific types of expenses. Expenses for travel will be reimbursed when the travel has the advance authorization of the superintendent. But then they put in the line, out-of-state travel in excess of 100 miles will require board approval. So we could just take out that line and you have a good policy. I mean, there really isn't anything else in there that, other than some things that you'll want in there, because it says lodging, meal, mileage for travel by private vehicle reimbursement rates unless in a collective bargaining agreement or individual employment contract will be set by the board at its annual organizational meeting after July 1, and you always do that in the first July meeting. All employee travel shall be in the most efficient, cost-effective manner, resulting in the best value for the district. The board authorizes the superintendent to establish administrative regulations to implement this policy. Regulations will include provisions for the use of private and rental vehicles, insurance coverage, expense reimbursement, and accounting procedures reimbursement for out-of-state travel by private vehicles will be made on the basis of airfare or mileage rate, whichever is lower. So that's what the current. We do, well, we do all that. So all we really need to do is take out that one line for the policy and revise the AR.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess where I was kind of sort of going is, if it has nothing to do with the school district at all, then it seems like, for instance, last year, Wesley had to get permission, and it had nothing to do with the school district. So is that covered
It
in
had
this too?
nothing to do with the school district.
As far as expenses or any of it, when I won my trip last year, the board had to approve her to miss a day of work because we were leaving the state. And it wasn't an expense, it was.
Well, then we did that wrong.
Yeah, we did that wrong.
That's not.
I just wanted to make sure.
That should have been, I mean, her absence would be approved through administration, but, yeah. But, oh, okay.
That was.
So that must have been a misunderstanding as to what the purpose of the travel was.
If you're not going to spend any of the district's money,
Yeah.
you know, if it happens to be during the work year, we deal with that through payroll.
Right.
Whether you have a leave.
But that's not even a different policy, that's what.
No.
Yeah, I was thinking of, I thought that was related to, didn't she go back and perform or something?
No, well, that was that one too, so that was.
Well, that one, though, was a little more related to, I
She had
think there was
to
some,
get
I think so, because
Yeah.
that has the cost. Did we pay her mileage or anything?
No.
okay, well,
Well, then we should have brought it.
yeah.
I just wondered
We should have brought it.
if there wasn't another one or if that was part of this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you fill out the expense estimate, it's all zero. There's no reason.
There's no reason to bring
Involved.
it, yeah. So, anyway, and now there's no, yeah, it's pretty clear. Just detach that piece and then you'll still get information on, you know, like the Avid and some of the, I think that's important to have people
Right.
come forward and share with you what they've been doing, because then that brings you up to speed. It's kind of
And some of the
interesting.
summer training.
Yeah, that's-
is
Much
really
rather listen to
important
the
for
Yeah.
career.
Than the board.
Teachers are really, you know, they like.
They do some amazing things, yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's important.
So will that then make the
It-
policy or AR?
No, it doesn't,
In terms of the-
I mean, we could insist on it, but I don't know that we need to. We can leave it off and just, that'll be something that we do.
Well, the danger of requiring is when 5 people do the same thing. you
Yeah.
Require 5 reports from 5 different people.
You don't know that you want to do that, so. If you find that you need it, you know, that's the nice thing about an administrative rule, you can always adjust that. It doesn't require a whole lot of,
Yeah, 'cause I agree with everyone, then, yeah. Hearing the after would be beneficial to us to learn along with them.
Also get to meet teachers, know personnel.
Yeah.
And much more friendly for the.
And the what,
teachers.
Mike?
The community
Yes.
is here too.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know,
Well, the
rather than
commu-
us asking
yes.
permission to do this, the
I know.
community's going to hear what, I
Yeah,
might.
exactly.
Yeah.
well, and the same as you were saying with the students, it was just like, although that was through the ESD, having that student that had the opportunity to go back to
Yeah.
Washington DC
Oh,
present,
yeah.
I think that's really important to
That
hear
was cool
that.
to hear.
Yeah.
And that will also get us, if we have occasionally technically violated the policy by having the traffic system, when I was saying.
Yeah, it's too late, and, yeah, for the board and all that sort of thing,
Violation
yeah.
of policy, it could happen before the board.
So we've had to do it afterwards. So this is great, yeah, this looks good.
Yeah, I think we can fix that.
Mhm. District communication plan, huh?
So district communication plan is next.
Do you want me to share what
Yeah.
Rebecca had? She just said, Board Member Rasmussen had offered a couple months back to develop a draft communication plan for the district based on the community survey results and many other things. I think we could really benefit from having a strategy. Plus,
Better
with a
work on
plan.
that.
Plus, with a plan, we may be able to budget for a little staff time dedicated to communications. Let's empower Dawn to work on this on our behalf. Obviously, we would still need to approve it. Let's just, you know, approve letting her get started. And I don't know whether this, I don't know whether, the other one is, I'll go ahead with it because I don't see where it fits if not for this. So it's the bigger topic, the long-range facility planning process is going to get us, she's concerned that it's not going to get us what we're hoping for. And I think we need to do a lot more work getting the community involved and engaging key stakeholders than the current 3 or 4 meetings allow. Like for us to study models such as Hermiston and Hoodoo to better understand the timeline and the process they used to develop their long-range facility plan and to get their bonds passed. And we cannot expect a different result if we use a similar process to what we did before. So anyway, I think the reference there is that, last year what we did was we put two things together. We did our we were doing long-range facility plan, bond planning parallel, and I think that was a mistake. So this long-range facilities plan, having that completed in place, and then moving into pre-bond kinds of work is what most districts, if you're looking at what they've done and how they've engaged. There are a lot of things that you could go back and look at again, We had talked about having advisory committee. There were a number of things that you could look at long range on that one.
Yeah, I'm thinking, we've done that work, and even down to if the decision is to go out for a high school, we've done all of the preliminary discussion and modeling of what that high school might look like on a particular piece of land. I mean, that's all been done. If, we might want to look at that again in terms of when we go out.
To inform whatever direction and gather input and so forth. But yeah, so overall, I think that does tie in with the communication piece because we want to learn from the past and say, okay, what can we do differently to make sure that we have people engaged from the very beginning before, so really the pre-bond kind of, once the facilities plan piece is over, which is almost finished.
So what are you thinking about when you say pre-bond plan?
Well, it's more what she's talking about and what you're talking about with the long-range facilities plan that we're going to be turning into the state is really just a skeleton piece. And it's a 10-year plan, and it's kind of like the framework to start the conversation of pre-bond planning, because we didn't and we won't get as many people as you want involved in the process in the few meetings that we have. And I really hear that. I think that's correct. But once you get that in place and you have your priorities, now you can have a conversation. You can change your priorities. I mean, that's what Richard was talking to us the last time about. The state is not going to hold your feet to the fire and say, ooh, you said you wanted to replace Colonel Wright and you're not doing that, you're replacing Chenoweth first and we're not going to let you do that. No, once you've gone through the process, as more people, as you start what you're referring to as, we're really thinking about going out, then you perk up the interest of the community a little bit more in engaging in the conversation. So I think that's what I mean by pre-bond planning, because you don't go out and say, okay, we finished this and this is what it says and this is what we're going to go for.
Yeah, we did this particular planning in the present bond process, the present facility process that we've done, and now it's set in stone. It's not. It's just, we had a conversation. This is one way we could go, but if you want to change that and be flexible because the time has changed, and we see our needs changing, you can do that.
Yeah.
And really that kind of goes into our future that way also.
So good point here. But that ties into the communication. And Robbie, I'm going to and I'm hoping that the next thing will be for you to be able to give us a backdrop of what we've been doing, communication, so that you can get some data that he's collected for us. Thank you very much, by the way.
You're welcome.
And see where we are before we start the discussion. I think that would be, if that's okay with the board.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I intend to do, is just to outline what we've been doing, what some of the data points that are interesting to consider based on the work that we have been doing. And then we have some basic recommendations of gaps that we see could be filled relatively easily. Not to say that we can't come have other recommendations that are not on the page, of course, and all the recommendations are open to discussion. But I've got a presentation, but it's also on your thing. Just to note as well here that this was a wonderful report and wonderful study that was done. We did make some adjustments on what we were doing after this report came out, how we deliver this information to our constituents. But more changes can be made, but a basic adjustment has been done post this report.
Good night.
That's up 7:00.
Okay, we'll just deal with all my tasks. So quickly what we're going to go over here. What we're doing, firstly, what our principles are in terms of this project. We have some opportunities to just watch a little media that we produce. What our goals are for the projects that we're working on within the different schools, and some interesting data points, and then, as I say, some recommendations. So the first thing is, what are we doing, what are we tasked with doing? The first one, and most importantly, we're telling positive and mostly evergreen stories from within our school district to celebrate great work from our students and our teachers using film and creating roughly one film per month. What I mean by evergreen, as we know, is that things that aren't super date specific. So a sports game is very date specific. It's very exciting while the game's going on, but 2 weeks in the future, now the game's not very interesting and we need to continue moving. So the things that you'll notice, much of what we create is very evergreen in that it has a long life. We can continue to use it to tell really positive stories from within our school district, and they don't go out of date really fast. They will obviously eventually go out of date, but they don't have dates on them, aren't specific. The second one is what we're doing right now. We're live streaming board meetings and some special meetings to the public via Facebook. There is discussion about whether Facebook is the right platform, whether it's the only platform, or whether we need to be engaging a multitude of platforms. Those are the kind of questions around live streaming that I'd love to have you guys help me answer. The next one is teaching video production, in AP video production at Dalles High School with Mr. Weber. We met Mr. Weber at the previous board meeting for the out-of-state travel request, and taking us back a couple of steps there. And we're, in terms of that class, we're writing and adapting curriculum to a constantly evolving technology space. So as we heard from Chuck, it's not just the way that we create the media that's changing, but the way that we're receiving the media is also changing. And so what we teach and how we teach it is relevant to where these students end up going to work, and we want to teach very relevant skills in technology that they can really use to really have value to themselves. And in contrary to teaching very basic principles of how a camera roll, film goes around, different lengths of film, things like that. We're really focused on digital film and even using mobile phones and cell phones to create some of those videos. Special projects with other D21 partners such as Mojo Community School and Club Legal GSD. When requested, we understand that we're in a big educational sphere and we need to, with a rising tide, let raises all boats. And we really want to see everybody succeed. And so we work within the community and we're really mindful in terms of trying to bring people together. We're trying to do different projects that engage more than one entity and show that we engage more than one entity. And it really adds value to both the piece of media itself, but also it celebrates partnership in the community, and something that we can't celebrate enough of. In my opinion. We also volunteer some of our time as well. You may have seen this high school bench project, that was all volunteering time. And again, back to the previous conversation around new schools and things like that, we volunteer some of our time as well with the strong community schools. So it's a really a combined approach across lots of different spaces. So, what are our communication principles? How do we approach this? So these are the principles that we work from. Kind, welcoming, works to create inclusion, celebrates teachers as much as students, aim deliberately at creating either positive or constructive commentary. I'll go back to that. Creating positive interaction or direct call to action. Thought-provoking, transparent, inspiring. So most interestingly here is this little aim deliberately at creating either a positive or constructive commentary. One of the things you'll notice about the way that we make the media that we create and release it is that it really intends to create a positive sentiment that's ongoing. It doesn't open up a box of a kettle of fish for other people to then pick apart and break and do what they will with in the public sphere. We really want to design that interaction in the very best way that we can and promote commentary, but also promote the right kind of commentary. And the way that we choose the projects as well will also that comes into play in those conversations around what are we choosing to show and how are we choosing to tell those stories. And we feel that's really important. These conversations can really get away from us, and we don't, although we in a very few cases we do remove some commentary. It's very rare for us to do that, and we want to limit that as much as we possibly can. We really want an open conversation, and we really want it to be constructive. And so we feel that's a really, really important part of anything that we go forward, is understanding that it's not just us talking, but also us listening in this world. And it's really important to understand that listening as much as that talking from where we go. So in terms of our conversation going forward, we need to think about that. Should we watch something just for fun?
Sure.
Yeah. Anyone got a favourite or something? Anything else? We've got Migrant School during the summertime. We've got Measure Community School. We've got one that we released last week for American.
Do Phil Brady's.
Phil Brady's. Okay, let me find it.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was up there.
Oh,
Never mind.
You're hilarious. Brady's is not.
It's not the classroom with that screen, that one?
No, it's robotics actually. It's Bill Brady's is pretty funny. So, you'll also notice this new banner. Hope you like it.
Yeah.
The colours are from the logo, so hopefully from a brand perspective, everything
This
together.
is your Facebook page?
This is your Facebook page.
The district.
The district.
I can't do small print off. I could read deep. Hey, that was it.
So here's Phil.
Hi, I'm Bill Brady, the science teacher at the Dalles High School. Welcome to the Dalles High School Physics. Today we're going to find out if we roll a ball off a balcony and we predict where it will hit the floor using physics. First, we measure the height from the starting point down to the floor. Second, we calculate then how much time it's going to take to fall from the top to the bottom. Third, we measure the horizontal speed using a photo game, then use that plus the time to figure out the horizontal distance. With plug the variables into the equations and do the math.
Yeah, so like it has 2 points, but it'll connect across, and when the ball like intercepts the loser, and then it calculates how fast it turns its input, and how fast it turns its We already we want it like a little bit, like a 1% range, something like that. So like it's consistent, so then it can always like land in the cup.
Yeah.
It always amazes me that nature knows how to do this. We put together these formulas, and nature just does it.
That's great.
So, as you can tell, we've got something that's showing a lens into physics at the high school that we don't see before. And it's not basic educational film, it's really a social media piece that celebrates education and its intended. The thing you notice at the end as well is a very light touch in terms of celebration of the teacher. It's a really small little piece of film that really just gives you a perspective that teachers, oh wow, this is cool. And this is really what we're building, and it's really a small little incremental build of building this trust, building this engagement with our community. I encourage you to watch all of these, of course. One thing to note here is that they are all linked together. So in the digital world, if you've noticed when you're watching YouTube or Facebook, the videos continue to come. And so if you find one of these in your social media world, then the next one will play, and the next one will play, and the next one will play, and the next one will play. And the other thing that we can talk about, we will talk about here as well, is discovery. So how are we being discovered? How are these videos being discovered? 4,000 hours of videos being uploaded to YouTube every minute. How do we make sure they're watching our content and not some content from South Africa? So what's our current goals? This is what we have, and this is space for you, of course. The target is to communicate with the community from within our schools in a guided way. I'm very fortunate, I get lots of guidance from Candy and the principals and the teachers, and the more guidance I can get, the better. Second is to decrease chronic absenteeism. The more engagement we have with schools, the better we see our schools. Hopefully that will play a part in reducing chronic absenteeism. This problem is obviously very complicated, and engagement with the community is just one part of that problem. To increase transparency, here we are last week. And to increase positive engagement and participation with district online, a little bit. And lastly, to best place the school district within our community to pass a measure when it becomes applicable. So at some point, we'll have to do this process. We'll have to go out for this bond. And at some point, we'll really want to have a really good relationship with the online community when that time comes. And the research that came, the research that came out of the Jane McLeod Skinner campaign showed that the number of interactions, digital interactions for a conversion process. So before, if you were interacted with 5 times online before the previous election cycle in 2016, 5 was about the magic number of converting somebody's opinion. After the 2016 election, that number grew to 17. So what we knew, the research showed that we really needed to engage people multiple times before they changed their opinion. We can make a really good film, and people can really be influenced by that, but unless we influence them again and again and again, that effect just really is not good. So that's enough of what we're doing. Let's just do some quick data points. These are total numbers of just our Facebook activity. So This is our project, so we generated 124,000 impressions, 15,000 clicks, almost 5,000 reactions, and 20,000 engagements online. And this was just last year, so it's December 3rd, 2018 to December 4th, 2019. D21 admin staff, Cindy, and her wonderful team over there, or me, they did 153,000, almost 15,000 clicks, 6,000 reactions, 20,000 engagements, and the funniest thing, the funniest piece of this data is that the largest amounts of those impressions came from snow days. And so the announcements around snow really generate lots and lots and lots of people.
Good job, Cindy.
Yeah, it was fun.
But it's obviously important to engage people on more than snow. But totally in the last 12 months, we've generated 277,000 impressions, 30,000 clicks, 11,000 reactions, and 40,000 engagements just on Facebook, and which is enormous. It's a huge number. Obviously, it's a big school district, we've got lots of students, we've got lots of parents, so it's probably in line with that. But just to give us some understanding of what to just give a metric. Firstly, well, let's look at this one first. This is a 560% increase from the year before.
Wow.
So we really blown it up, we really engaged people online, we're really creating lots of conversations. In terms of growth of followers, we've got 190% net followers growth, 193%. So we've got 487 new followers this year, which is 200% more than we've got new followers the last year. The last thing to say here is that this was a 99.7% organic. What does that mean? In Facebook, we can pay for strategies. You know, they keep showing you them boots that you've looked at and keep looking at the garden tools, the exact same thing, really wants to sell you that chainsaw. And all of these strategies that we're doing are non-paid, almost all of them. The only thing we do pay for is when we try and promote things like long-range facilities tracking, because it's just that to some people, in terms of the online engagement, in comparison to cute cats, pretty brilliant. It's obviously not, and it's not to us, but we need to put it in front of them so they know.
We should do cute cats in long range food.
Yes! I'll call her last.
There we go. That would be awesome.
In terms of areas for growth, opportunities for growth, this is an opportunity for growth. We can do more paid strategies. They are good strategies. This is also to note, this is just Facebook. This doesn't include the website. This doesn't include YouTube. This doesn't include Snapchat. This doesn't include Google. It doesn't include a vast array of other digital spheres. So these numbers are probably double or triple what I'm showing you from a really big perspective. But this is just Facebook. So just to let you know. What was the average post and reach engagement by type of post? So photo and video about the same. They get a very good reaction. They get pretty good engagement. People click on them. People engage with them. Just statuses and just links don't get as much. They get about 40%, something like that. The engagement that the videos and photos do. So this shows us that it's really worthwhile creating something and taking a photo, making a video. It's really worthwhile because it really has a much greater impact than just sharing a link or writing something. Information is also information, so it doesn't take away from that. Another interesting data point to consider, many of us use YouTube. YouTube's a very popular place to watch videos, obviously. But watch videos on televisions, on devices, on mobile devices, and people across the spectrum of age are using YouTube. One of the things that we do in YouTube, and one of the ways that we promoted long-range facilities planning, is using YouTube ads. So you're watching YouTube and you see an advertisement and you can press the skip ad button. That's typically what it looks like. So to give you guys an idea of how much that costs and all those sorts of things without diving deep into a digital marketing seminar, $50 ad buy in YouTube this was from October, this was literally 2 months ago, $50, we got 7,000 impressions, 1,500 views. It cost us about 3 cents per view, so 3 pence. And we got, it was some mobile phones, small amount of tablets, small amount of computers, and about 50% TV screens. So our ad for long-range facility is showing up on people's televisions at home. That's good news. We also noticed that it showed up on people's television at home. It didn't break the bank, which is good because we don't have that opportunity. So we can probably switch the lights back on. This is where we go into recommendation. So the first recommendation I've got is newsletters. So as you guys may get a lot of newsletters in your inbox, I'm not sure your Gmail inbox perhaps, the newsletters are being created district-wide in the different schools. There's a music newsletter, there's a sports newsletter, there's a high school newsletter. I mean, I don't actually know how many there are.
At every school, there's something named for
It's-
this. Elementary too, right? There's newsletters.
Well, you know, I don't know what the consistency is
Yeah, it's not.
with that. Yeah.
I think it's random.
For example, I watch just across the district of what's going on. And for sure, I know that Jim Taylor at the high school is putting out a really nice newsletter on a regular basis because that comes up. And, but I don't
But I
necessarily.
heard Teresa mention too the other night about.
Yeah, but it's not something that goes out, like Jim makes sure that it goes so that I can see it. And so I think we can probably, we need to talk about that next additional step.
Yeah, and so really what I'm just outlining is that the work is being done already with the newsletters. Because for me, there's two parts of this. There's the content creation, and then there's the content publishing and promoting. And so the content creation is often the hard bit. And I mean, they're both difficult in their own unique way, but the content creation often takes the most time. And lots of this content's also already being created. And that's what I'm just trying to identify that there are people in school already doing this. And what I'd like to do, what I think it would be the best thing to do with this information is to take each newsletter, and each newsletter probably has 3 or 4 little articles in it, right, as well as probably some other bits. And really copy and paste said article into a news system, an online news system, which would be a website that's separate from the main website infrastructure. So the news would sit in its own level of infrastructure. And then we push that news out through both that website, but also social, and also through places like Google News. So it would come up with people's and that allows it to go to 100,000 places without us having to actually press all of those 100,000 buttons. But it would all, if it lived in that, it would always go through that approval process, which it went through that original approval process of being on the newsletter, and then we had another layer of approval process of our news sphere, which then allowed us to get this news out in the right way. So basically, it would be just taking these newsletters and just forming a digital system that then pushes them out. With that, also kind of creates some other opportunities. What we learned in the audit was that people trusted teachers the most. They trusted the information from the teachers the most. It also taught me that the board probably needs to communicate with the public a little bit more as well. But it's only reasonable if there's actual mechanism for doing that. When there's no mechanism, it can be hard. And Don, will tell us, writing all the posts can be difficult and time consuming. But not to say that you shouldn't be doing it or that it's a bad thing to do. It's
We're
great.
ambassadors, and we should be, every time there's a post coming out of the district office, all board members should be amplifying that by forwarding it, putting it on our own page, and then posting it in the local pages and things like that. So it's not just, I've been kind of doing that, but everybody should be doing that so that it's like reinforcing. So it may be 4 or 5 times, but then that's repetition within that group.
Yeah. but also to create an outlet as well. This would become an outlet for both teachers, administrators, and everybody alike, and really a place that they can put something down that's not necessarily just the staff saying something, and instead a member of the D21 community writing something. And so it changes the way that we were communicating a little bit, and they will keep those, the really important update and announcement information in the administration world, and it would allow this kind of news interest pieces to live in a separate place. And so that would, the important announcements from Cindy, for instance, wouldn't get lost in the big sphere of information, because that's obviously, you know, something to be avoided. So anyway, that's my first recommendation, is to just take those newsletters that are already being created and just create a single system, which would be a website that then hosts it, that then pushes out to the social media, and kind of hosts all that information in one place. The second one is quite similar. We have about 6 or 7 or 8 different calendars in this online district system. Many of them have been shared in terms of the district's calendar is shared amongst the others, but there's no place where you can find all of the sports events, there's no place where you can find all of the music events, there's no place where you can find all the other volunteer kind of other engagement opportunity events. We'd love to at least explore an opportunity to certainly start with sports. Can we create an online sports calendar that contains the sports postings from all the different schools in all the different sports, and put them in one place, and allow that calendar to be then live in different worlds and on different websites for people to access that calendar. It would be about increasing engagement, increasing people's access to this information, and would aim to increase participation. And I think it would increase participation in a really good, consistent way. And again, this isn't more information that we're creating, and we're not creating a new sphere of information through a new lens. We're just taking the information that we already have, and we're just putting that onto a shared calendar using technology to share it across the board. The last one is volunteer opportunity classified board. I feel that there's lots of volunteer opportunities in the school district. I think each one contains its own unique set of parameters, and I think there's a lot of discussion to be had around that. But somewhere people can go to find ways to volunteer or to take part or to engage in the district, it's really going to benefit people. And that's everything. So I'll happily take questions or thoughts or ideas.
So some things are happening like at the city level, like at the chamber level. I don't know how much, some of the major things that happen in the school district might be pushed to those two avenues because they get a lot of viewership on that. I mean, I'm just thinking outside here. The volunteer opportunity classified board, what I don't quite understand, like, is that within the classroom? What are you talking about?
Well, if I wanted to volunteer in a classroom or not necessarily in an extracurricular activity, I don't think there's very many places for me to go to find that information out. And I've been volunteering with the Boy Scouts for 10 years. You know, I'm really good at volunteering with people. And so I feel that if that information was available, I'd be more likely to volunteer. So where is that information hosted? And surely that's a flow of information, because as soon as the opportunity is being filled, you want to remove it so you don't have a constant access to information all the time. So it'd be opportunities across the district. And it would allow teachers to ask for help as well. You know, and other volunteers to ask for help as well.
So how does this get managed?
These are the questions. That one's the most difficult one, in terms of management. That one's definitely the most difficult one. I I'd imagine that it would go through an approval process. So, like we have a community calendar with Columbia Gorge ESD that do all the different local parenting events and early learning events for 0 to 5s. And we have an approval process, so when somebody puts something in there, it sends us an email saying something has gone up and you need to approve it or reject it. And then we press yes or no, and then it either gets deleted or it lands on the calendar. And so there's always an approval process about what public information is. But it also allows the person doing it to do it themselves. It doesn't create an extra job for somebody to go into the website after doing it. So that's somewhere halfway in between. So in this case, I imagine that the principal or the administrators are getting that email about the person, the teacher that wanted to put the opportunity up, or the coach put the opportunity up, and then that would be looked at and assessed, and then either accepted or rejected, and then all the people that applied would have to go through a background check as well, as they already did. So it wouldn't make it easier necessarily to get to the position. You still have to do a background check. You still have to go through a criminal history check. It's just really more about the information being in the workplace.
I have a few thoughts. The volunteer opportunity classified board is definitely right now it's difficult. And it would be nice to just be able to see what's out there. The calendar, we have an exchange student right now that she did volleyball. Just figuring out when her games were. Like her coach could tell her, you have a game tonight at 5 o'clock, and I could go online, and her first game, it said it was here, and it said it was at the high school. I went to the high school and watched 3 rounds of the wrong team because she was at the Tonka. And that wasn't even on there, so it was extremely frustrating. So it would be awesome to see something like that. And then my only other comment is, you didn't mention Instagram at all, and that's what students use. Facebook's encyclopedias for students now. They're on Instagram. And if we want to engage them, we need to get on there. And a lot of times,
yeah, it's not really that simple, but yeah, the reason we don't currently do as much Instagram, we did build an Instagram account for in Wasco, and we do when we do promotions, they go out on Instagram too. So when we do paid promotions, they will go out to Instagram just as much as they do Facebook. But we don't post images to Facebook because we always have to do it from a mobile device. So it's actually quite relatively expensive for us to do that for people. We're happy to do it, but because we haven't gone through that process with you, that's the reason we haven't started. But it's good feedback, and we'd be happy to post to Instagram.
That's just what, if we're talking about students specifically,
Right.
that's where they're at.
Whereas for older folks, probably Facebook's a better choice.
I think
I don't know.
as much as news, I mean, news then receiving that news is really important, and it's not just Facebook. I think we're receiving it all over.
So I'm just going to throw this out because I volunteered myself, which I forgot, the draft communications plan. So I want to be conscientious of the work that you're doing. So it sounds like you already have sort of some strategies and actions in place, correct? Okay, so, we talk about content creation. I'm just trying to think, I'm tactically thinking about the strategies and everything here. So there's kind of the content creation, the content promoting, and then the engagement. They're kind of like the big three. Does that sound like it's fair to everybody, so I can kind of focus on starting to structure this draft? Obviously, I'm not going to do it right now, but I can start working on it, and then I can put it on email, and then we can have a discussion about it.
Yeah, they're definitely linked to each other. They're all complementary of each other, for
Yeah.
sure. But those are good questions.
Okay. If anybody has any other thoughts, please feel free to contact me. So I'll just start kind of putting things together.
Well, the other piece I want to bring up, and I talked to Robbie about this before we went down this path, is that when it comes to the content creation, we actually have done that. Like last year, it was really trying to do it more organically, who is interested, who's willing to engage, because it does take time. A few years ago, when we had a Safe Schools grant, we had a person who was just designated to do a lot of this kind of work when she did communications. She spent the majority of her time trying to get content because she couldn't create the content. She needed to, so that's the hard part. I think it's becoming, just over time, I think we have to be a little patient. It's becoming so that once people see more of this and see like the videos and so forth, it seems to be generating more interest by more people. You can tell me that I'm wrong, because I just sense that that's what's happened. And at first it was trying to find someone who was willing to engage to help create content. So for this newsletter piece, I'm really cognizant of the fact that we're going to have to actually look at what people are doing in each building, because they are where they are. The fact that Jim Taylor is spending a good amount of time putting content together, I was thrilled that he's taken that on. But I don't think you can say that's happening in every school. And so I think we'll struggle a little bit with trying to, and then the other thing that happens is that sometimes somebody moves on that was doing that work, and then it doesn't get done. So just be aware that those, especially when it comes to newsletters or that kind of content creation, that's one I really want us to be sensitive to when we're working with staff, because that's on them. We want to help promote, but we don't want to put more on their plate.
Right, it's like that takes time, so that if they're stressed for having time to do something like that.
Yeah.
Or even if they can just give us leads, you know, that's the other thing, you know, because we don't know. I mean, we don't have our finger on the pulse. So I was wondering even if there might be staff meetings at each school that, you know, somebody, maybe from one of the board, we can go talk to them, you know, get on the agenda there and say, hey, you know, we're really working on our communications plan. We need you because we don't know, the community doesn't know, you are our gateway. You have to, you know, help us. We want to support you and, you know, sound out about all the wonderful things you guys are doing and your students are doing, but we don't know until you tell us. So I don't know if that would be helpful. I don't know if that's a tactic that we can look at, but you know, maybe that might help get it unstuck so they see that we're actually on their side and we're trying to help and celebrate them and give them more support.
Robbie, what were some of the ways, because you've been in every building, what were some of the ways that were most effective for you last year and this year as you've tried to
in terms of navigating the schools and what's going on?
And engaging and getting, so that you could put together, for example, a video and you know how, yeah. So.
Yeah, you've understood the problem, especially for somebody that's not in the school all day. You know, somebody has to go to school and then find the person in school who's also got a job to do, and then engage their time, which is then, as you pointed out, is not teaching and not administrating. So it can be quite difficult. The principals have been very helpful. Principals typically know what's going on. They know what needs to be celebrated, and I've leaned on certainly Kurt Evans and last year Stephen Duke as well in terms of engaging with what was happening and how it was happening. We've had a new principal at Chenoweth, so it's taken them some time. As what I'm pointing out here is that as people move on and change, there's a transitionary process here that you know that needs to be mindful of, totally. So you know, I don't want to put extra pressure on that person to also be necessarily responsible for community there.
Other tasks.
Exactly.
One more.
Yeah, and so but it's every school has been unique.
They are. They each have their own culture.
They each have their own culture, and every teacher has their own level of stresses and strains, and I think that changes week on week. because we're constantly dealing with students, which are the best people in the world. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult problem. One of the things I think to think about here, just in this newsletter piece, I think, like the newspaper, I think the newsletter lost a lot of effectivity in the dawn of the internet. So I think it was really commonplace to create a newsletter, even just for a small group. For one, this is a great example. You know, it's great to have a newsletter, but really for the amount of work that goes into it, how effective is it? And when the newsletter is totally paper, and then it goes to your 32 parents, and then you've spent 9, 10 hours putting it together, it's not really worthwhile. It is, if you really love writing, it's worthwhile. If you're like me and writing's very difficult, then it's not worthwhile. And so, I think with technology, if a teacher is creating a whole newsletter is very different to writing one article about something that's doing really well in your classroom. So I think we need to separate this as, instead of looking at the newsletter from a whole, each teacher, maybe if they were tasked on writing this much writing per week, 2 weeks, I wouldn't task it that way. But if the task was not to build a whole newsletter, and instead to just build an article or 2 articles, I think that would be a much more manageable situation. And I think we can use technology to deliver that information in a way that's better than the newsletter, because it goes to more places and it lasts for longer.
When you engaged our kindergarten teacher and did that video, how did that work? Because, I mean, I think of all the places that might be, just because of the rhythm of the day for a kindergarten teacher. How did that work?
Courtney Middleton, KonMari. We still use the term KonMari when I need the office clean. I'm like, KonMari this place, please, right now. And it happens, it's amazing. That was, did you let me know about that one?
Yes.
Yeah, so Candy told me that you sent me an article, and the National Association of Teachers,
Yes.
NEA, had done an article on Courtney because she had approached her classroom with this Japanese method of organizing things called KonMari, which is a really cool way of organizing the way that you live. And I encourage you to read about it and watch it. And then I engaged with the principal, who engaged with Courtney, because Courtney was busy teaching. And we chose a time to talk about it, which was at the end of the day. It was right at the very end of the day. And so when we interviewed the teacher, and then, which took about an hour or so, and then the next day we went in and I filmed for about 10 minutes during the lessons. And if you'll note, when you watch the film, you'll notice there's lots of abstract films. You'll see hands and you'll see things like that. And that's obviously deliberate. But it started with the article, which was the piece of writing, which then I was able to create into a film, and then we went back and forth on 2 different edits, and I think that was it. But it started from an administrator telling me what was going on and where, and then allowed me to then follow up and stuff like that. Without that, I never would have known.
So it's how to, and I'm always looking for it, because I don't find all of these things. They don't always come to me. So it's, if someone gives me information, I follow up on and then try to share. But just to understand how, it's really difficult, because, you know, your staff they're full on engaged in what they're engaged in. And even though it may be something they're excited about, coming in and saying, oh, we want to make this film isn't necessarily going to be well received. So you have to be very, very careful about that. So I think as you build this, Dawn, I guess what I'm saying is be careful about our expectations and hard and fast rules about how it is to happen, because think we really need to have some flexibility there so that we're not adding one more stress.
I'm very cognizant of that.
Yeah.
We need to have layers of approval at every level, and then no stress.
But I think that thinking of content solely on, we're gonna make a video of this would be wrong.
Right.
Like, I think of like low-hanging fruit that exists in every school that you just need to communicate out there, like student of the month, like that's easy. You just need to put it out there. Right now, I've never seen one so far all school year. I know they probably exist at the schools. We have winter concerts coming up, like another easy one that's already built in. So I think we're trying to think of what content do we create, and you take back and what content do we already have before we start creating more and utilize that, kind of like the football. That lended itself. Did we create that? Yes, but that opportunity presented itself, and I think that if we actually look, there's actually more. And not just in the athletics realm, there's going to be the academia side and a bunch of other stuff, teacher side.
There's things that are already happening, like you
Like
have a
I look
snippet
at-
of a concert, if there's a play
Yeah.
that's being performed, do a short scene, football practice or basketball practice,
And-
just like,
Yep.
just all these little things that are already going on that we could just slip in there and then just
Yes.
get that little snippet out of it.
Yep. And like I've been loving, I don't know if you guys have been seeing, but like the Wetumpka Community School has been doing a whole bunch of
Yeah,
stuff over this past week for a lot of wood shop stuff that's going on, and that's
that's the
been
therapy
awesome.
dog today that,
Yeah, so
yeah, I
so
saw
the
that.
dog, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stuff
All
like
of
that like, it's just, I think the content is there, and it's just a matter of sharing it with everyone.
And you're absolutely right, and that's really what we're talking about here. And the two things that come to mind here when you say that are, first one is channel. So we're obviously talking through a North Wasco Schools channel, which is representative of all of the schools, but they're not community schools. And the other thing to think about here is that if we promote Chenoweth's music, then we have to make sure we promote Dry Hollow's music, obviously.
Yeah.
Perfect, that's two pieces of content right there.
It's double, right?
I don't
Yeah,
see
but
that
just
as a
making sure
problem.
making sure those all
You throw Colonel right in there and you've got three.
Yeah, but if without the calendar, it's very
Yeah,
difficult.
I mean, this, like your recommendations here, basically, in summation to me is, and I think a few of us have already expressed this, that we need to just revamp our website, period. Like, I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen people comment on, it takes me 5 clicks to get to X. And there's multiple, like, yeah, the volunteer stuff is buried in there. But again, it's how accessible is it? And I think a revamp with these updated elements is kind of, because my question earlier was going to be, who does our website currently? EC?
Cindy is
They created it?
well,
No.
she's the one that has to maintain that website. And you want to remember, we don't have a community. So what you were talking about earlier is a whole separate website. We are required by law to have certain things that you can do within 2 clicks. And I suppose that there are probably places where people have staff that's what they do, is maintain the website. We don't have that. And so we have those legal requirements on that piece that have to be, by law, you have to be able to get to certain things within 2 clicks. And so what Robbie was saying is you can't then impose all of this.
25 articles about sports.
Yeah, or make sure that that's fresh and up there, and because then you can't get to some of those things that are required when we're audited by the state to see if we're complying with certain laws and regulations. I know there are districts that do websites better, but the ones that I've talked to that do websites better are ones who dedicate, that's what the staff person does.
Right, which
We
we've
don't
had
do
this
anything else.
conversation of needing that, a person in that position.
Well, and I don't know that we do so much as perhaps we do more of what Robbie's saying. You've got a different, it's what is your purpose? And so while we've already got Robbie doing certain things, this idea of a different, it's not that hard to go to it, right? Because it's it's like he's doing the North Wasco Facebook for us. So those kinds of things that are, it's a less intense way maybe to get at it.
The website, I think, is also, I think it should need to be think about it from the two ends. So there's the user end, the way that we use it, the way that we receive that information, and as you rightly said, it's a little dated in the way that it looks. And then there's the other end, which is the silly end, and it's a really complicated, slow, difficult process.
But is that a function of the current website and the software being utilized?
Yes.
I would imagine that there's more friendlier user interfaces now that have been more up to date and have more of the flashy.
There are, and for places like for Forward's Family, a company called GST, for the 0 to 5s, it's quite easy because, and that's, we just finished the project actually yesterday. Done 2 websites for them using a totally different piece of software, which allows the staff members very quickly to go in and change information, add information, and do what they need to do to be able to communicate effectively.
Well, there's the cost factor too, I'd like to throw out.
There's a cost factor, yeah,
That's
as well.
pretty significant, especially for a district of, there's gonna be a lot of pages, so we're talking
It's-
20 plus grand.
It's a really expensive deal. The other thing to think about here is the Blackboard and Google Learn and PowerSchool. And relatively, some of those softwares are integrated with our current online infrastructure. Blackboard is. Cody Harmon, for instance, for us.
Yes.
There's quite a lot of very intricate integrations with our website system, and any new software that we use has to integrate that way too. And so, because of that, it does also make it a bit more expensive. Okay.
It seems
Cynthia,
like
do you
one
have-
of
You know our website is the same as the ESDs, right?
No,
It's the same
Forward's Family,
company.
yeah, EST is on the same deal, but Forward's Family.
Who?
Four Rivers Family.
Four
Oh,
Rivers.
that's a separate,
um,
okay.
Early Learning Hub.
Yeah, we've moved them to a different software because they didn't have
So what
Blackboard.
happened is School Wires originally had our website, and we researched websites for about a year. And we came down to the best website, the best company literally for schools was School Wires. We had the website created and built for us, and it was working great for about 3 or 4 years, and then they sold. And once they sold, they started doing all these upgrades, and it's very difficult. It's very unuser friendly, and it's very difficult to do, so that's probably why Four Rivers moves.
One of the reasons. You really have
And
to
you
get out
can't
to Cindy
integrate and weave
for
and-
what she does on the site. 'Cause
And so how much does it, because the other piece that gives me a bit of a nervous twitch is if ours is any way integrated with our, like, Power Schools or
Our
any.
website is not,
Loves, okay.
and I don't know if it
so
can.
we're not-
Maybe it can, I don't know.
Well, if it's not, I just worry about anything that Power Schools has to interface with. That's
We don't.
It doesn't sound
that's
like it
huge.
is.
That's our student services system.
Yeah, that's what makes me nervous about it.
Yeah.
Can I ask, first of all, I think they're wonderful recommendations, so thank you. I hope we can accomplish all of them.
Okay.
But intuitively, it feels like the calendar would be the easiest thing to do first. Is that right?
I don't know.
Maybe?
I had a long conversation with Cody
I'm
about
curious
this.
do you envision
Please.
this being on our website or in another location, like a live calendar where schools add their own? I'm curious what
Well, that's
more
actually what
on this.
happens now. Each of the schools can add to their calendar, and if they want to add it out to the district calendar, there is a process. And actually, Leslie is the only one that does it, where it bumps up and it says, so-and-so wants permission to do the main calendar. But there's a process, yeah.
And I'm just thinking about how easy these dynamic things, our calendars are continually changing day to day. Sports calendars for cancellations and weather and stuff like that. I just wondered if it was that easy to change what was on the calendar once it's out there.
It would be the same as what's happening now, so I think it'd be hosted through Google Calendar. So it would be the same as what you're already using and the same as what the schools are already using. What I'm proposing is that we beam all of the calendars into one master calendar, and once that's created, it can go and live on any page. It can live on 10 different pages, it can live on every school's website.
So it's a live feed, so
Yeah,
basically it's in the cloud, so if someone is at one school and adds a sporting event, and then it populates the whole thing, because it's reciting, it's like a link basically, but
Exactly.
it pulls it over. But I was gonna say, even on Google Calendar, you can even add separate calendars, so you can click the thing and say, I only wanna look at all the sports events, or if I wanna look at the sports and theater events, and then you can have different layers that you can add, and people can click them on and click them off, and then you can see immediately, but then you can.
Like only their one school, like maybe what
Yeah, you
child
can even do by
is, they
school,
want.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that way it's really
Can you
easy.
do that, Robbie?
I can do that, and that's the vision. Yeah, that is the vision. On a bit more investigation last week on this subject, it turns some of the things are in Google Calendar already, and we are. And I had a long conversation with Cody and another technology specialist in CGSD about this, and they are. Everybody is almost in Google Calendar except for sports. Sports is in VAA.
It's through, I think, OSAA.
OSAA?
I was kind of looking at it.
There's a pretty cool sports system that we subscribe to,
Yes.
and it's cool. Like it's got loads of cool features, and I think we can beam from there. It's a bit more difficult, is what I learned. That integration between that
BNN.
VNN, thank you, will take a bit more understanding. It was a bit
But 2
scary.
points away, that would be probably the easiest and most feasible
At least
thing.
3 here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once it's in Google Calendar, we can really do so many things with it. People can set up their own notifications. So you can say, if you like football, you can email me every time there's a football match. If you like music, you can have an email you every time there's a concert.
So an alert system.
There's loads of things, yeah, there's loads of stuff we can do there. People can RSVP to the events, you can sell tickets in there. Like once it's in Google Calendar, we can really integrate it across loads of things.
Yeah, you need a kind of a streamlined process so that every person who's within the district can add to one calendar, so to speak, so that everybody knows how to do that. I mean, in other words, everybody's in the loop about if you want to put your stuff out to the community, this is what you do. Because one of the things I find just for myself is there's a lot of different things happening, but I don't exactly know. There's no one place to go find
Grand Central Station.
Yeah, there needs to be a central station, but there also needs to be the ability, instead of like, I mean, I guess you could gather stuff at each school and then shoot it out, but I'm thinking it's easier if every person has the ability to just directly interface with that calendar and stuff. But
I
then
think we have to
there's
have a
the check.
conversation with staff around that, because what we've encountered, our original vision with calendar was to have things go to the district calendar, and it's never worked because people find it easier to go a different way to do their calendars, and that's what they've done.
So maybe part of it is also an in-person training for each school when it launches.
It gives everybody more access.
Yeah.
Onboard people to the system, however simple we say it is,
Yeah.
an in-person tutorial goes a long way, I think.
This does need to happen. And the middle school is putting sports dates on Google Docs and then putting a link to the Google Doc on the website. We go into the into the Word document and find information there. So I think some people will get it quite fast. I think others will need time.
Well, and so that's a good analogy, because what we have are people who, they know how to do something this way. This is the way they can get it done. And so that's what they use, because they really don't have time to take on and that's not high on their priority list. Then you have other people, the opposite end of that is that what you're doing isn't as flashy as what I can do on this platform. And I don't want to do it on your platform. I want to do it on my platform because it does X, Y, Z and has bells and whistles and shooting stars. And those are both, they're very legitimate kinds of things. So it's the nature of education. It's not always as.
I'm the nature of technology. You're absolutely
technology,
right. Yeah,
yes.
you're absolutely right. And someone finds a better way of doing it, and they say, "Oh, look, there's a better way of doing it." And then there's a learning process here that we'll have to go into this plan.
Well.
I have my work cut out
Yes,
in
you
front of me.
do.
No, I got some good ideas here. So this, again, anything that I would come up with would be just like, okay, let's throw the spaghetti on the wall and figure out what sticks. So, trying to factor in all these different considerations between legal requirements and equity and consistency, engagement, accessibility, outreach, cost, channels, resources, and that kind of stuff.
And
So.
stress level on staff.
Yeah, well, that's
That's
it.
a big one.
And the resources are like, who's going to do this since we don't have a dedicated staff person, and then the time involved. So yeah, let me sift through all this, and you're laughing at me.
To add, the one thing we haven't talked about is translating any of this
Translation,
information.
yes, thank you for
So,
absolutely. Thank
I
you.
know we've talked about it before, just didn't mention it tonight.
Good point. Okay. Thank you.
So we're currently doing 2 different posts.
I have seen that, so that's been awesome.
Yeah, and
Like I
they-
saw it on
and-
Phil Brady's.
This
That
is
was
great.
cool.
This
Yeah,
is
and they're
translated
labeled
too. This is great.
digitally as English and Spanish as
Yeah.
well. So if somebody's using Facebook in
Yeah.
Spanish, then it comes up in Spanish.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more for the good of the order?
Sorry.
Sorry, I saw that.
No, that's
Oh,
good.
that was good.
No, it's
Yeah,
really good.
lots of ideas.
Without that, it wouldn't be as full. And that's true. And thank you for the visuals.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay, so without any objections from the board members, I'll adjourn this meeting.
I'm gonna go in my writing hidey hole.
Oh, my goodness.
You got it.
A lot.
Sounds like we got everything.
I just felt like.
We'll see you in like a few weeks.
Yeah, what's that? I will come out when the
You will
ground
need
ball
to-
shuts out.
She'll show up at the next board meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I'm good.
I'll be like the groundhog. Oh, okay.
What's the other one?
Got it.